Welcome back, everyone. Everybody get their seats. Mike Spector is going to come up and he's going to interview our panel of one today. Our largest automotive retailer in the country and NADA's largest member. I think everybody knows Mike Jackson. I think you're going to hear some interesting things as usual. Last year, AutoNation sold a whopping 338,000 new vehicles and another 226,000 used vehicles on revenue of about $21.5 billion. So talk about scale. They have it. Gentlemen, you want to come up?
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, Mike.
Mike, how you doing?
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Didn't your paper get a Pulitzer today?
Peggy Noonan won for commentary, but the newsroom got shut out, so thanks for bringing that up. And she was congratulated by Kellyanne Conway on Twitter.
Wow.
So
that's my goal in life.
Right. So let's jump right in with stuff that's happening. Tesla traded ahead of General Motors in terms of market value for a time, surpassed Ford. This is a company, as we all know, gets plenty of attention. They make electric cars. They also seem to always be in need of money and are unprofitable, but yet investors are undeterred. What do you make of this new market landscape?
Well, clearly General Motors is undervalued and Tesla is overvalued. I mean, anybody can see that. Why is General Motors undervalued? I think it is underappreciated, the fact that gasoline is affordable in the United States for as far as the eye can see. The innovation of fracking has unlocked several Saudi Arabias of petroleum and natural gas in the United States. And if OPEC was ever to try a boycott again, we could simply look at them and say, you're fracked. You know, what can they do? And it's a wonderful place to be. And that means that this shift to being able to produce what people want to buy, namely crossover vehicles and trucks, which is now approaching 65% of the mix, which is very profitable for the manufacturers, is structural and it's long-term. If the mix was switched, that gasoline was $5 a gallon and the mix was 65% cars and 35%, we'd be having a completely different conversation. So this shift to sport utility vehicles and crossovers and pickup trucks is permanent, it's structural, it's long-term, because the customers passionately love these vehicles. They love the command high seating position, the utility, and the design personality, and they're not going back. And with affordable gas, there's no reason to go back. And that underpins, at the OEM level, profitability in the United States. And if you take the Trump administration, which will put in CAFE requirements, fuel economy requirements that are rational rather than irrational, the outlook is very good. So I think that's, and if you look at GM as a company, they've made a brilliant and developed a compelling position in China, and they made the right decision to withdraw from Europe. So GM is undervalued at $33 a share. One investors will figure that out. I can't explain. Now Tesla, you know, is inexplicable. It's totally inexplicable. And as far as its valuation, so it's either one of the great Ponzi schemes of all time, or it's all going to work out. I think the Model 3 will be the test. I think we'll know in the next year or two how this is going to play out. You have to tip your hat that he's created a brand that has a strong cult-like following. What would impress me about Tesla? Selling vehicles at a profit would be very impressive. I mean, giving away vehicles at below what it costs you to make them, is not very exciting. And you know, if you can't make money at 100,000, I got a great idea. Let's make money at 35,000. Well, geez, that's going to be tough. And they got a lot of competition coming because you have a mandate. All electric vehicles are basically a compliance mandated car, so every manufacturer has them coming, and I've seen some of them. They're very good offerings. So Tesla's facing more competition. So we'll see. In my personal opinion, how this will play out over the next few years, in my personal opinion, GM is undervalued, Tesla's overvalued, and at some point there'll be a correction that reflects that. But we'll see.
Right now, though, our investors, I mean, obviously they seem to be, I might be answering my own question, making the bet that long-term, the problems you described structurally with Tesla will correct over the long term?
Of course. That's the bet.
Right. But you think Wall Street is wrong. They're wrong about Tesla.
I think Tesla's overvalued. Yeah, I said it. There it is. Boom.
So you, in that answer, you raised a lot of interesting things that have all sorts of political implications that I want to get to, but I want to drill down in the retail business for a moment and talk about stair-step programs and what you're seeing there.
I thought we were going to have a nice day here today. So
who's the worst offender? I also want you to.
Beautiful morning.
I also want you to talk a little bit about smaller dealers, some of whom would claim they're in markets other people don't want to be in, and how you think they're being treated by OEMs.
All right, multi-tiered pricing or targeted incentive systems in the extreme are unfair to consumers, introduce a level of mistrust at retail between consumers and dealers and retailers that is unimaginable, extremely disruptive, questionable legality, and at the end of the day, here's the most important thing. So why does a manufacturer do stair steps? They want to drive down, they want to create the perception in consumers' mind that something's available at a price that's really not. So you have a wide bandwidth on pricing because depending where dealers are in the stair-step process, you can have, you know, a $25,000 car be selling for $15,000 because you got to get to the next step and it's retro, it makes sense to do that deal. So the perception gets out there that you can buy these vehicles at these huge discounts, but actually only a relatively small percentage of customers get that. So it's deceptive at its core, and certainly if you have a long-term customer you've done business with for 10 years and is trusting you to give you a fair price, and they get one of these stair-step vehicles, they look at you like you were trying to rip them off. So you've undermined the loyalty between the dealer, the retailer, and the customer. So it's very corrosive. But here's why it's not in the interest of a manufacturer to do that. So the resale market prices the resale at the low end of the bandwidth of the price spectrum. So the resale market's saying, oh, well, if I can buy XYZ vehicle at $18,000, that price is out there, then that's the value in the resale market. So you collapse the resale value of the vehicles, which then damages the brand because you've pulled out the rug out from under every customer who trusted you to protect their brand and their resale value. You've undermined them, because then we have to deliver the bad news when they come in for trade to say, this thing isn't worth what you think it is. And there you are, you set off a downward spiral, and as you go into that downward spiral, you grasp for straws to keep your sales figures up, therefore you jam more into fleet at a big discount, and fleet becomes an ever larger part of your business, and then those fleet vehicles start coming back at those big discounts, which again push down your resale value. So unless you have a short-term mindset, you know, in the short term, you know, it's like heroin. In the short term, it feels great. That's fine. We're having a lot of fun here. But it's very corrosive and does a lot of damage. And They really, it's a practice that is not sustainable over the long term for a manufacturer. The only question is how much damage is done by the time you stop. And so a lot of dealers will give up on your brand and your franchise somewhere in that journey and say, listen, I can't be part of this anymore. It's not what I want to do with my life. And then you change over the ownership of your dealers. And so it's just awful on every level. So thank God that most manufacturers are thinking about the long term and the value of their brand and don't go down this road. Those who do collapse their resale values, do a lot of damage, and somebody's going to have to clean up the mess someday.
Is there an OEM that you think is doing more damage than others?
I kind of thought we may get to this today, so I've decided not to do names today for various reasons. But all you have to do is take the residual value guide, take a crossover vehicle, take a sedan, and benchmark resale value after 3 years. I promise you, if you do that, the bottom of the barrel will be the companies that are pushing extreme stair-step targeted incentive marketing programs. There is linkage there. And I don't think they're serving their brand well by going down that road.
Okay, so we have homework.
You have homework. Everybody has a homework assignment. But they already know the answer, so it doesn't really matter. So.
You mentioned a lot of things with political implications at the top of this conversation. You used the magic term compliance cars. I want to, and there's a big shift to what people want to buy, hulking trucks and SUVs. I want to talk about all of that, but first, who'd you vote for in the November presidential election?
Well, I put it this way. First, I did not vote for Donald Trump. And the
Why
reason,
not?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Even though I agree with his assessment of the U.S. economy and agree with him on many policy issues, I just simply didn't feel he had the appropriate temperament to be president of the United States. And I think so far, I might have a point there, what I would say, okay?
So that temperament argument worked on you.
So, no, I think it's the truth. I mean, 1 minute he's a 70-year-old, the next minute he's a petulant 7-year-old. I mean, it's bouncing back and forth. So what's the report card on Mr. Trump? I give him high marks for his assessment of what's wrong with America. America's about economic vitality, economic growth. That's the gravity that keeps together this melting pot of America, that we're all going to grow together economically. And as long as we're growing at a good rate, I think it holds everything together. And that simply hasn't happened over the last years. And I agree with his assessment of what's wrong. Onerous regulatory environment of the past 7 years was shackles on the U.S. economy. And it runs everything from EPA to financial institutions, Consumer Protection Bureau, Department of Labor. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And he has appointed professional deregulators. These individuals know this stuff inside and out. And we'll still have regulation. We need regulation. But the shackles that are holding the U.S. economy back will be drawn. He delivered on a big promise on the Supreme Court. He made a masterful choice. And I agree with, we'll just confirm the Supreme Court with a majority. This filibuster rule needed to go. It's long past its due date in America. So I give him high marks there.
It's outside the industry, but just one moment, and since you brought it up, do you worry, and I mean this could bleed over into automotive policy at some point in the future, that getting rid of the filibuster will make things more hyper-partisan as time goes on, especially in the divided America we're in now? I mean, it's obviously already that way, but that people will go even further into their corners,
no,
and there's no more 60 votes.
We're already hyper-partisan. Are you kidding me? I mean, we're there already. We're just reflecting the reality of where we are. And I don't want to turn into the history of the filibuster, but you used to have to filibuster. There used to be a penalty to filibuster. You had to actually stand there and physically do it. Now you can just do it with clicking on your cell phone with a text. It's ridiculous. So I think it was time to move. I think his cabinet positions, by and large, are first rate. And I applaud his move on Syria. I think it's reestablished America's principle around the world that there's certain things we just won't stand for. I think his legislative agenda is in trouble. I mean, we're coming up on 100 days, and his replacement Affordable Care Act, which the Republicans repealed 90 times under Barack Obama. Now they have a president who would sign it. They can't get it passed. Are you kidding me? How ridiculous is that? And the tax thing is sitting nowhere. It's incoherent. Who knows what the tax thing is? And we're coming up on 100 days. So he literally has 1 year to get done healthcare reform, tax reform, and an infrastructure project. And he's blowing through the honeymoon period. Then we're coming up on the August break. Then you have a little bit time to the end of the year. Then you have Christmas break, and then you're into the 2018 elections, and forget about it. So a little nervous on the legislative front.
So he did do one thing that I guess you could call a short-term accomplishment that I think a lot of people in this room are probably happy about, and I think you've said is the right thing to do, which was reopening the review.
That was my reference
tailpipe
to,
emissions.
he's appointed professional deregulators. They know exactly what to do. This guy, Scott Pruitt, head of EPA, is brilliant and masterful. And the total automobile industry in the world is fully committed and investing billions upon billions upon billions to improve the fuel efficiency of the products. That is all underway, and there's no turning back. The question is, what is the rate of increase per year? And in typical Obama style, the curve takes off after he leaves office. The hockey stick kicks in. And
after he leaves office.
After he left office, it kicks in, exactly.
Just
Well,
making
that's
sure.
where the pain's coming.
Not his second term.
And no, after the second term.
Okay.
And there was supposed to be a review in 2018, and here's a guy who couldn't make up his mind about the Keystone Pipeline for 7 years, and took a big complicated issue with a promised review and did it in 30 days. Okay, after Hillary didn't win the election, despite the fact that I voted for her. So the Trump administration did what is prudent, because here's what's diabolical. If you had left the Obama 54 mile per gallon standard in place, the added cost per vehicle is astronomical versus the benefit, and the more exotic materials you have to use, that you make new cars so expensive that people won't buy them, and they'll keep their older cars, which are already 11.5 years old, and perversely you put out more pollution and consume more fuel because you left extreme regulation in place. So we'll now actually have cleaner air, and people will be predisposed to buy new cars that are much cleaner than their 11-year-old car, much more fuel efficient, and we'll do a better job of saving the planet. So I applaud him, absolutely.
So on this topic, I wrote a story 10 years ago about the industry. This was back when we were just dealing with CAFE. And we're heading into the LA Auto Show, and the likes of Rick Wagner and others were proclaiming they could not get to a 35 mile a gallon standard. Well, they've gotten there, more or less, right? Isn't there an element here of wanting to just tweak margins and ease compliance costs, notwithstanding the market arguments about what people are buying and where sales are going? Some people would argue, right, that the OEMs can do this, but they just want to ease compliance costs and tweak the rules.
So the American public has said unequivocally, we are not going to pay for exotic fuel efficiency technology in cars. Hybrids and electrics, despite the proliferation of offerings from the manufacturers, remains less than 3% of the marketplace, despite the fact that the offerings have exploded. And to meet these fuel economy standards that are contemplated to get to 54, you have to have a major conversion to hybrids is the only way to get it. And you're adding $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a car technology that people will not pay for it. We've pretty much told the manufacturers, okay, you're going to do a certain percentage of hybrids for compliance reasons. They have to be priced identical to the corresponding size and power vehicle that's not hybrid. And so you have a hybrid which costs $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 more to make, same price as the comparable internal combustion engines. And so you got an improvement of 7 miles per gallon in fuel economy. Customer still buys the conventional car, even at the same price, let alone if you put a $5,000 price premium on it. So be serious. And by the way, I met with the EPA people when this deal was being done and said, we're facing a major disconnect. And I talked about the perverse consequences. And they guaranteed me that in that meeting by 2018, gasoline would be $6 a gallon. Well, if gasoline were $6 a gallon, I would say we got a shot of getting people to buy these cars. But guess what? American ingenuity intervened. You know, one cranky guy in Texas took his own money and invented something called fracking, George Mitchell. Now, if I had been there, I would have said, George, listen, the environmentalists are going to be all over that name fracking. You might want to call it liberation or something like that, but fracking's not the way. Anyway, so here we sit. And do you think the environmentalists and the past administration had the guts to put in place a gas tax? Well, that's what I suggested back then. Listen, if this is what you believe in, then put a gas tax in place. That'll keep everybody's attention on fuel efficiency.
This is bipartisan cowardice on that issue.
Bipartisan cowardice is not going to happen. And so there you are.
Well, you mentioned environmentalists. One last thing on this topic. California.
Okay.
Right. What if the EPA and NHTSA, they come up with changes, the industry agrees, California doesn't agree, they won't go along with the One National program, then the EPA in an unprecedented manner rescinds the waiver, and now California sues with Eric Holder and Eric Schneiderman in New York, and now we're in litigation, and now it's the 2020 election, and nothing's been addressed.
Okay. So first, when I'm going to California, I kiss my wife goodbye. I say, where's my passport? She says, what for? I said, I'm going to California. Why? I said, I want to make sure I can get back in the United States of America. Going to it's a foreign country. There you go. And one of the most powerful foreign capitals in the world is Sacramento. And when it comes to environmentalists, I mean, that's ground zero. And I expect exactly as you described it, they will use everything they have to try to hold what the current position is, to the point where the Trump administration will be confronted with the question of, do you leave the exemption in place that California is allowed to go its own way outside the federal standards?
And it does in other states.
And have other states adopt it. Now, the reason the exemption went in place is because California had some unique air quality issues. But bear in mind, CO2 is the same everywhere in the world, okay? There is different CO2 in California than there is right here in New York City or in Beijing. CO2 is the same everything in the world. It's something that happens all the way up there in the atmosphere. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned about it, but it's not a state issue. So you have an exemption for a state that has put in place the zero emission mandate. It's a mandate. Manufacturers must sell a certain percentage of vehicles as all electric. So they're all coming. Or pay Tesla to do it for you, which a lot of manufacturers have been doing, but
Sure.
that shows about the end. And if California pushes it too hard, I think the question, looking at the Trump administration, they may go, you know what, California, we're bringing you back into the United States of America.
See you in court.
See you in court. Could be.
I'm going to get some questions in the audience in before we run out of time. We talked about stair-step programs. One question is, what should large dealer groups do to convince OEMs to stop doing those programs? And what influence do they have over how incentives are
I want to go back to, because I forgot to answer one of your questions about the small rural dealer in America.
Yeah.
I, for the life of me, cannot understand why manufacturers make life so difficult for rural American automobile dealers. And the domestics should thank their lucky stars that that rural network exists. Those dealers are pillars, single point dealers, are pillars of their community. They know everybody in the town, and for the privilege of selling some pickup trucks and some other things, they care for that market in a way that is a labor of love and passion, and why you can't find a way to respect the value of that without compromising what you have to do in the bigger markets, for the life of me, I don't understand. So, boom. Now, what were you asking me? What was the other thing?
What can large dealer groups, or maybe even the small dealers, you could talk about what maybe they could do in terms of organizing, but large dealer groups, what can be done to try and influence these stair-step programs or influence OEMs on incentives
so
generally?
if I think the argument that I've used with everyone, either to keep them from going down the road or get them off the road, is the resale value. It's not in their interest to destroy their brand and their resale value. And that's what they're doing with these programs. I would say, though, that overall, you know, I've come to terms with the fact that in the pure selling of a new vehicle, forgetting the extreme stair steps for a minute, basically, the manufacturer invoices us something electronically before we even see the car. You know, boom, money's gone, certain amount. Then it finally gets there. We take care of it. We advertise. We find a customer for it. We sell it for less than what they invoiced us for. And then we got to jump through. Then I got to pay out all my costs for having done it. So now I'm in the hole. And then if I jump through 50 hoops and dot all the I's and cross all the T's, I get some money back that gets me back to what they originally invoiced me for. Ooh, wow. I don't think that's changing. I think the manufacturers have developed the tools to really manage that. So we have to think about how we grow our business and how we make money everywhere else than selling the new car. Because I think that is what it is, and I don't think it's going to go back to what it was 10 years ago. When you actually made money selling new cars. I think that's over, and it's probably the biggest change in 100 years in auto retail, that this is what it's come to. But once you come to terms with it and you really get your head around it, you can really find some creative ways to go new directions to grow your business and be profitable, and you just have to accept that that's where the new vehicle market is.
We're about out of time, but I want to, if I can, sneak in two from the audience, and I'm going to double barrel it, see if you can give me some quick answers. What's AutoNation doing on the service side of the business to keep vehicle owners loyal and away from Jiffy Lubes and other places for routine maintenance? And totally different, self-driving car, friend or foe for the dealership?
Okay. Well, you know, connected with what I just described, shifting our focus to every other part of the business, you know, we've concluded that's what we have to do. So we will change where we source parts to get a lower cost and a better deal, and we'll brand them AutoNation, and we're going to expand in freestanding, unfranchised customer care centers and pre-owned centers, and put the AutoNation brand on it, and grow our business with what we can control. So that's underway. Autonomous, well, I think they will arrive in the marketplace where you replace a professional driver. So Uber, taxi, trucking, because the cost of the system to be truly autonomous level 5 is probably $200,000 today per vehicle, and let's say over the years you get it down to $100,000 a vehicle. Unless you're replacing a professional driver, you can't make an economic justification for it. So that's full-time, and I think that's maybe 5 years away. We'll see. Maybe even longer. Who knows? Then, as far as personal use, I think it's more in what I call the guardian angel concept, where you put these systems in the car that help you avoid accidents, and they're active all the time. And in certain situations, they can take over driving, like in low speed, below 25 miles an hour, and you're in tough traffic, you can hit the button and it can sort of go. I think, though, the industry in the personal use market has a challenge in that they're overpromise a system that underdelivers. And the way they get around this is they say to the owner, okay, you use our autopilot system here, but you have to monitor it
Just to take one.
100% of the time. And it's your responsibility to intervene if something goes wrong. And if that car crashes into a truck that's crossing the road and chops off the top, that's your fault. It's not the system's fault. You weren't paying attention. Now, let me tell you something. That is un-American. The idea that I'm supposed to sit back and enjoy that this autonomous system is driving the car, and on the other hand, I got to be paying attention every single second, ready to intervene before the thing crashes? Are you kidding me? I mean, you're asking me to trust this thing, but I got to be sitting there monitoring? I'd just rather do it myself. I mean, that would be like having you meet a wonderful new girlfriend, you're having a great time, and you say to her, listen, I got to hold your hand. I trust you, but I'm going to hold your hand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, how long is that relationship going to last? You know? Gets on your nerves. Well, it's the same thing with this autonomous thing. You mean I got to pay attention all the time? What the hell's the point of this? Turn the damn thing off. I'll just do it myself. I mean, I could drive a car easier. It's easier to drive a car down the highway. I'm almost up here on mental autopilot, but I can do it very skillfully. Human beings could do that. I turn the system on and I'm like this the whole time. Now the moment. Give me a break. Thank you.
On that note, thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody, for the questions from the audience.